Hi everyone, I hope you're all safe and sound as you can be in these strange times we find ourselves in at the moment. Trevor Price has asked me to do a short video regarding feeder fishing for skimmers and bream and carp at distance to break up the boredom for you anglers out there, give you something to smile about and think about next time you're on the bank. Well, I'll start by saying back in 2004 I started spodding in matches, mainly for bream, skimmers, for a few carp, a lot of the venues around Milton Keynes area and around the country actually. And it was unheard of back then, and it worked big time. The main reason was the distance you could put. Excuse me. If I keep looking down, I'm sorry, I must apologise. I made some notes and I can't remember everything I've wrote down. The main reason was you could put a big bed of bait down at distance quickly. Now, however, over time, for many different reasons, spotting and spomming became banned nearly everywhere. And so we had to do something else to get the bait out there. And so these were born, the giant bait up feeders. They weren't commercially available at the time, years ago. So we all made our own concoctions, all sorts. They did a similar job. They put the same sort of bait out at a similar sort of distance, but the catches definitely suffered. They weren't as big, certainly not for me and many anglers that I knew. It wasn't quite the same. I realised in the end, obviously, it was the spod. When the spod hits the surface and upends, or a spom opens up, all the bait falls down through the water, be that 6, 10, 12 foot of water, whatever depth you're fishing in. And by the time it hits the bottom, it's spread out a fair way, more than you probably realise. And this created a perfect grazing ground, feeding ground for bream, skimmers especially, and carp, to hold a shoal for the duration of a match, which is what we're interested in, really. Now, the giant bait up feeders got the bait out there, but just in big clumps. Definitely not as effective. And everyone's obsession with accuracy these days means that these feeders are landing on a very tight area. Big clumps of bait, like I say. Now, obviously, I know some of you are going to say, well, I strike it out halfway through the water. Well, that's all well and good, you know, if you can guarantee it is coming out halfway down. I don't think you really can. I've done some tank tests and done some tests in shallow water around lakes I've been fishing, and I don't think it comes out like you think it does. Anyway, I don't think it's good because bream, like a lot of fish, spend a lot of their time off the bottom. So a big feeder whacking mid-depth, you know, through fish and hitting fish potentially, more than potentially, can't be good, especially if you hit certain key shoal fish. By that I mean certain fish in a shoal, and it's been proven, are the leaders in a shoal. And you disturb one of those fish by a big feeder whacking into it, it's going to clear off and take the shoal with it somewhere else, quite possibly. And I don't want to take that risk. I don't like the idea of doing it. It's not right. So I worked out a trick of creating a similar spread of bait to what a spom or a spod does, using a big bait up feeder. The way to do it, well, I'll explain really. Most of us use a 12 or 13 foot rod for baiting up, because a lot of us use an individual rod for doing that, because big heavy rods is fair enough. I do the same. So for instance, say you're fishing at 70 metres. Now, so your clip's up, you've got your big bait up feeder on, loaded up, whack it out there. What I do is, rather than hit the clip, well, I hit the clip, obviously, the same clip. I don't change the clip. I hit the clip hard, point the rod at the feeder, let the feeder fall down with the rod pointing right out from me into the lake. Do that 4 or 5, 6 times. The next 4 or 5 or 6 casts, hit the clip, but immediately bring your rod 90 degrees to the right or left, whichever handed you are, and then let the feeder hit the bottom. Now, the feeder has now hit the bottom 8 to 10 to 12 feet shorter of your original baited area. And I do that for 4 or 5 casts, creating a spread of feed, which I believe definitely holds a shoal longer. I've proven it, and better. It definitely works. Well, it works for me anyway. This improves the spread of the bait, as I alluded to earlier with the spodding and the spomming. So I thought, right, this is great. And it's only one part of the puzzle though, because next bit of paper. The spread of bait is out there, but you've still got to catch the fish. Now there's a definite technique. I use a definite technique for catching fish, bream and skimmers, certainly at range, and it's worked really well over the years. It's basically 3 steps. The first step is I will catch over my baited area all day long. Lovely, great. It's very rare. It does happen. If you're on a good peg. I don't often find myself on good pegs. Secondly, I will get the odd liner after an hour or so, but I haven't actually caught anything. And people will say, you had a liner yet? You had a liner yet? I say, yeah, I've had a liner, I've had a liner. All right, they turned up then, right? Well, yeah, they have turned up. And a lot of people will stay over their baited area and wait for the fish to actually get their heads down on the baited area. Now, it doesn't always happen. In all honesty, most of my biggest catches in matches all around the country, not just Milton Keynes area, but everywhere. Most of my biggest catches I've caught up to probably 10, 12 metres shorter of my baited area, with bream and skimmers and carp as well. And the way to do it is, like I say, you'll get liners, and it's very simple, and people don't do it. I just can't believe it. If you get the odd liner, I will reclip. I'll take the clip off, wind 2 turns on my reel handle, which on my reels is approximately 1 metre per turn, roughly that. You have to have a good memory now, obviously, to know how many turns you keep doing this, because I'll reel a couple of turns in, have a cast, and quite often, if I've been getting lines, I'll catch a fish. I'll stay there to catch another one. And if I'm catching, I'll stay there. If it goes quiet, I'll reel another couple of turns in, reclip, fish it shorter, and keep going shorter until I find what is normally like a sweet spot, if you want to call it that. And I'll stay there and just keep catching if it goes to plan. It doesn't always. But that's generally the second way of catching the fish. Now, it's quite easy to get back to your original baited area if this isn't working. You just simply unclip, pull off a certain amount of meters of line, reclip, fire it out there. And again, I count the reel turns, so I know if I've gone back to roughly the right area or not. 1 meter or so here and there. At those distances, I can't believe it makes too much difference. But coming shorter, basically, is what I'm trying to say is a big thing that a lot of anglers don't do. It's very simple, but they won't come. They'll come a little bit short, but they won't come massively short like I will do. Now the reasons I think there's 2 reasons why coming shorter rather than going longer initially works better at distance. One, I believe the fish are attracted to the general baited area. Pellets, casters, all fish love them. Of course they do. But they do get wary some days, for whatever reason, as we all know. Some venues, etc. A lot of anglers fishing, tight pegging. And they won't always go heads down on that bait during a match. They might do it at night time or whatever. It's no good to us. But they're there. They're in the general area. Now what I think they do is they patrol the area. They swim around that baited area, roughly. Pretty much. That's why you get liners. They're in the area, they want to eat it, but they're not sure. So by dropping short, you're catching these patrolling fish that are circling. That's what I believe anyway. With just a small parcel of bait, you're catching them. They don't want to feed over a big bed of bait, but they're sort of interested. So by coming shorter, you're catching fish that are a little bit wary, etc. And you're catching fish that other people aren't catching because they're still sitting over there mounting a bait, which on that particular day isn't working. Secondly, why I believe coming shorter rather than going longer is worth a try is because, as I said earlier, certain fish are key fish in a shoal. And you'll hook a fish, a bream, skimmer, normally bream, some carp, winding it in. Fish will definitely follow that fish in for a short time. They just do. I've seen it in shallow water. Even netting a fish after reeling it in from 70 metres. I've had 2 or 3 bream following it at the net and turn away, and carp definitely do it. So you can imagine this happening out at 70, 80 metres odd. These fish are just coming in a few metres and then sort of just stopping, disinterested, and just wondering what's going on. So over time, a few fish do hang around short of the baited area and become very wary of that baited area. So by dropping short, you can catch a lot more fish. Don't be afraid to do it. Doesn't mean your baited up area hasn't worked. It just means that the fish are responding differently to a heavily baited area. So, okay, next notes. I'll say, if I'm honest, most of my match wins over the years, and not just wins, seconds, thirds, I'm not boasting, have seen me catching proper short of my original fed area. Now these distances, the guys around you are sort of looking, and as far as they know, you're still fishing 70, 80 metres out. They can't really see that you've come in 5, 8, 10 metres and that you're catching now. They say, how come you're catching? I say, well, I've come a bit shorter. And you'll often hear people say, well, I've come in a couple of metres and still nothing. I thought, well, yeah, you've not come in enough. And like I say, the 2 reasons are fish are backing off that feed, they're very wary, and key fish follow hooked fish in for certain, and then they hang off the baited area. It's a definite thing to try in matches, and pleasure fishing obviously as well. So to the third point, after all that, if all else fails, and quite often it does, I'll unclip and I'll put my heaviest feeder on, only a small one though, not a big feeder, a small, tiny, heavy, modified feeder. And I'll whack it out as far as I can with the gear I've got. And we've all got gear these days that can whack a feeder a proper distance on big waters. This is big waters I'm talking about. I remember last year's Thursday 3-day festival. I was on the far bank, the famous far bank, where the bream are bigger, there's a lot of carp, etc. It's good fishing, a lot of fish there. And I was surrounded by quality bream anglers. I had Michael Dalziel from the RAF one side of me, Spud Taylor, bless him, the other side of me, great guy, and lots of other good anglers all in the area. And we were all catching on and off as such for the first 2 or 3 hours, and then my swim just completely died. I mean, died proper. Step 2 didn't work by coming short. I didn't get any liners, so I knew it wouldn't really work. I tried it, didn't work. Oh no, they were still catching around me on and off, fish here and there, and I thought, oh God, what do I do here? So I had an hour to go, I unclipped, and did basically what I said a few minutes ago about whacking it out. Stood up and gave it a proper whack out. I don't know how far it went, but it went a long way. I don't bother counting meters, etc. Now, as I've told you already, I count reel turns. I think it was around 100 reel turns. I remember sort of counting it as I was winding some of the bream back, because first cast I had a 4-pound bream. This is right out in the middle of nowhere where no feed had gone. So I thought, oh, I'll try that again then. So I whacked it out again, not clipped up, so it wasn't really landing in exactly the same spot. And I had another one, and then on and off. The last hour I put over 50 pound in the net and won the bank. It was great. So it just shows you that with the potent baits we use these days, a small tiny feeder, all on its own, cast in the right area where the fish want to be, is enough to catch and hold enough fish to catch again for a short period of time. Because these fish are out there for a reason, for whatever reason on that particular day. They're not over your baited area. again, and they're not circling it, they're not coming short, they're nowhere near your baited area. So it's important to have the gear to be able to reach much further out on these big waters. I can talk about that another day if people are interested. I have my thoughts on the gear you need to use, etc. But these fish that are out there, they're not shoal fish, are they? They're not shoaled up together. So they want to be out there in little units of 1 or 2 fish. And they're not interested in feeding over large amounts of bait. So that's why this works. So the 3 steps really are: catch over your fed area within that 12 foot or so that I've created. Secondly, which is more common for me anyway, is to creep in a little bit, bit by bit by bit, until you find, for whatever reason, the spot where the fish are happy to sit. And thirdly, if none of that's working, make sure you've got the gear to be able to whack it out proper. And you'll be surprised. I think you'll surprise yourself at what can be caught out there. I could talk about the baits I use, etc. I've got very strong opinions on the baits that work for bream and skimmers at range, and I have people that know me. I will always tell people what I use. I do in my Facebook posts, etc. A lot of people don't believe me. They seem to think there's secret baits out there. There are certain baits that work better than others, for certain. I'll go through that another day if anyone's interested. But for now, I hope I've given you some food for thought, and giving you something to think about next time you're on the bank. And I'd like to thank you, and just stay safe genuinely in these days. And I'll see you on the bank soon. Thank you.